Hello and welcome to Monkeys with Fire. I hope everyone is well and have had a good extended Easter break, painting up your minis or playing your tabletop games with friends and family. So tonight we are going to be joined once more by Pascal, and he will be doing one of his workshops. Tonight's workshop is going to be about object source lighting. And as you can already see, we have a wonderful scene that Pascal has been working on. But of course, we need to have a miniature in there, and that's what we're going to get to see this evening. And welcome, Pascal.
And good evening, everybody. So, guys, I'm going to try to do something about object source lighting. And there's actually a lot of theory about light and how light works on objects and how light reflections work, etc. I'm not a master in it by any means, so there are probably some masters out there that would defy everything I say. But this is everything. What I'm going to tell you tonight is everything I've learned by doing it, by studying other people's words and materials. And I'm trying to convey it over to you. So there's going to be a lot of theory in the beginning. Hope you got your notebook. And then we're going to see how far I'm going to get with the werewolf. Speaking of which, this is it. This is the werewolf. And as you can see, I've already got it in two-color priming. So there's black on this side, and this is actually the front side you're going to see most. And then the back, I've primed it mostly white, and that's going to be useful later on while painting. And of course, you want to see where it's going to end up in. And you already got a nice picture there, but here is the full-scale piece of it. And let's have a turn around. So, object source lighting. First of all, a technical term, object source lighting is an object that's going to give off light, but it's another light than your, let's say, your main light. Mostly that's like the sun or your normal light source. But then there's an extra object that's going to spend a different kind of color of light to it. That's going to create something different in the scene. This is called object source lighting. There's still some debate between painters if this object should or should not be on your base or on your scene or whatever. I think it's not really relevant. If it's just off of the base, just off of the scene, but it's creating a second or even a third light that's just behaving differently than your general light, then you're talking about object source lighting. If you're talking about OSL, there are two things you've got to take into perspective, and that's one is the light source, and the other is what the light is bouncing off of. You know, what is reflecting the light from that object, and both objects they have certain things you have to take care of, which you have to think of before you start painting. You know, so let's go to the most difficult part first. That's the light source. When you're starting to do something like OSL, you first got to think about the light source itself. And there are a couple of things you take into consideration, and probably the most important one of them is the intensity of light it's going to give off. All right? Like in the scene with a werewolf, I've got a moon, and this moon is really, really bright. It's going to shed its light all over the world, right? And it's actually brightening things up pretty big. But take something like a fire that's close by, like a torch. That light is really intense on the skin and this part of the body if it's held here, right? But if you would do like a soft glowing gem, then that's not really intense, right? The glow of the gem would probably go somewhere like this far, and it would not go in full out, blown out on this side of the model. So this is the intensity of light. This is probably the most important, because it's going to be the thing you're going to think about is it drowning out the color of the object that it's reflecting on. All right, if you've got a fire, the color of the fire is drowning out all the color that's in here. So if I've got a blue t-shirt on, that blue is not going to be seen in the light in the intense light that the fire is giving off, right? If you're going to do a really bright red alarm light pretty close next to a model, that red is going to absorb and is going to overwhelm all the other colors that it's reflecting on. All right. If that light is being much smoother, much lower, much less intense, in that case you're going to be able to see mixtures of the color of the reflected material and the color of the light. So in that case you can have some mixture. So for instance, shining a blue light on a yellow t-shirt, right? There could be some green in there. So this is something to think of when working out. The thing with a high intensity of light is that it not only drowns it out all the other colors, but the other side where the light is not coming to, that's going to be darker. And the more intense the light is going to be, the darker the other side is going to be. And I've seen Anthony Rodriguez paint up some character once who had this flamer on, and there's the big flame coming off, and he painted the OSL of the flame on the model, and the rest of the model where the light did not come, it was just painted in purples, only purples actually, and it really did the effect. So you take into consideration that the more intense the light is going to be, the darker and the more toned down the rest of the model is going to be. So if that's the intensity, that's the most important thing, or the most visual thing of the whole thing, then you also can think of the color of the light. So basically you got three colors, red, blue and yellow. And of course you can get green lights, and you can get turquoise lights and purples and whatnot. But in basic, if you take those colors, that's gonna behave differently when reflecting on materials. And that's because colors have strength. And take the first primary colors, blue, red, yellow. Then of those three colors, yellow is the least strong of these colors. And this is so in painting, but it's also true in real life. If you got a yellow light, like right now I've got a yellow light reflecting off of me, but do you see me being yellow? No, you see my skin being lit up. So that's it, right? Yes, there's a bit of yellow in there, but you see that the yellow is not strong enough to be pure yellow, but it's going to mix with my skin color. If this would be a blue light or a red light, that would be much stronger, drowning out the colors on my skin, right? Especially true with blue, which is the strongest of the three colors. And this is why my moonlit sky scene is blue. I'll take it again. So the moon is white itself, but actually the whole scene is bluish, and there's no visible color of stone in here. It's all blue. The color of light is important. Then the size of the object that's shedding its light is important, because, well, obviously a big like a searchlight blowing full on your face has a different impact than a small LED light on a wristband, right? So the size is going to impact how big and how far it's going to reach. I think that's obvious. The placement of the object is important, not only because light travels in one direction, right, in a straight line, so it's going to hit this first and it's not going to hit this. Exactly like that, you know. If I'm going to place my light here, then this is going to be lit and this is going to be dark. So I've got a sphere upside down. But also, if I got my object that's giving light close to me, it's going to be much more intense, much more pronounced in color shading than if I've got it far off, right? So take into consideration where is your light going to be, right? And then there's the surrounding light you can think of, which is like your main light source often, like the sun. Is there another light source? How bright is that going to be? And is it drowning out the OSL, or is the OSL stronger than the surrounding light? So which one is going to be more pronounced on the model than the other? So that's the side of the light source. If you got those figured out, you've got half of the equation figured out. So let's go to the other side, the material that it's reflecting on. You've got to think about that too, because not every material is going to reflect light the same way. Obviously, let's take two very opposites of each other, like cloth, which is much more absorbing the light than it's going to reflect it. And something made of metal like armor, which is going to be much more reflective, but it's going to behave differently. So this is the thing. The reflectiveness of the materials is probably the first thing you've got to consider. So if I've got something like cloth, that's going to be very absorptive, and some parts of the skin are often as well, but skin can be very reflective also. Then the light that it's reflecting is going to be diffuse, but it's going to be big. So like the light you're seeing now on this part of my shirt is pretty big. It's like this area, but it's very diffuse. If this would be armor, and I would have like a red light up here, then that armor would be much more reflective of it, but it would even reflect the exact shape of the source of it, of the light source, but it would be much smaller. So it's actually a mirror-like image, but much smaller in size, right? And this is to know what I mean is to do actual tests with it, with real life objects and stuff. So take into consideration how it reflects. If you've got a light source up here, my cloth might not even show any light reflection from it, but if I've got a metal piece over here, that's going to be able to reflect it. While this distance is much farther, and this is much less, the metal is going to be much more reflective than the cloth. So this is something to consider. You have your distance to the object, but if I've got a very high absorptive material here, and I'm not going to see it unless there's a lot of stuff to bounce off of. Then the thing is color. The color of the material is also important. Like I said, with the intensity of light, it might drown out every piece of color you've got, but often than not, you can also make a mixture of the two, of the color with the original color of the material underneath it. In this case, you've got to take into account the value of color and the value of the things you're painting. So here's a couple of rules that you've got to take into account. And so the number one rule, which is often a rule that's taken has been done wrong, is that the area that is lit, the source, the light source is always brighter than the area that is lit, and the area that is lit is always brighter than the area that is not lit. This is a value kind of thing, you know. If you're working in grayscales, you obviously know what I'm talking about. If I would put a gray filter over this, you would just see brightness and darkness, and the light source should be the brightest part of it all. Then the sheen on it, the reflection of that light, should be the second brightest. And no matter what color this is, but this should be darker than the rest. So this is what is making the most effective, most convincing OSL. This is contradictory to what I just said about if there's a big light source like the sun shining up here, which is gonna make this part as bright as well. So this is a thing that you've got to take into consideration when you're doing a model, because we have the choice to do dramatic effects. So we can choose to not have the sun up there, or have the sun be less bright, so that this part can be darker, so that this OSL will pop out much more. Right? So take your freedom of expression here very widely. The second rule is what I'm reflecting off, even if it's on a metal surface, the reflection is never as bright as the original source. And this is why in painting it's very important to have the original source as white as possible, if not pure bright. And there's been a fun comparison with lightsabers. This is the thing: if you activate a lightsaber, and there would be nothing around it to reflect its light, then the only thing you would see was pure white, because in its brightest part it's white. And just by having like an atmosphere it can bounce off, then you see the blue or the red or the purple or the whatever color of the reflections around it and on every object near it. Right? So this is what I try to do in the painting, is make that object that's shining as bright, as white as possible. Even if it's fire, in the midst of that fire, in the most intense part of the fire, it's white. My moon is mostly white. Then there's a couple of rules. Most of the people that try to dabble in OSL do get this right. So color of object is affected by the light. I explained that already. Light moves in straight lines, and the strength of light diminishes with distance. So the further you put away the source, the less strength, the less reflection it's going to create on objects. There's just one other thing I'd like to show you. In my talk of spheres, you've got your light source, your main light source, and then it's going to go darker to the bottom, right? So this is old news. Let's say that from the bottom there's another light source that's going to interfere with that. So suddenly there's another light point up here. What a lot of people do in this case is they're gonna glaze over the light color over the entire model as far as they can see the light. And what this does is blending your original color over to the new light color. And that may seem nice and correct and good, but the blending is too soon. There's a small space in between those two colors that's very, very difficult, important to take into account, and that's like this. I'm going to try to show you. I hope this works. So here's my main light source, and this is like a sketch going darker towards the lower side, and then there's another light source going here. And that's going to do actually like the same pattern, but maybe smaller because it's a smaller light source. And what you see here is a dark line, like a darker area. And this darker area, it makes it very, very important, because that's going to separate those two colors. And this is something I'm seeing in a lot of work where it's near black, or at least a very, very dark color of either of the two, either the main light or the object source light, before it shifts over to the other color. So like I said earlier, this side is much darker because that's going to be out of the light. It's going to be like this, right? And the other side is going to be much lighter. So this is, I've actually put it like this, this bright, because I'm gonna paint blue over it, and I want that blue to be really, really bright. Let me see if I can show you the color transitions. Probably here. See this blackness here? Well, it's blue on top, red on the bottom. That is what I'm talking about. So the moon is going to come from here, actually from the top. I'm just going to paint this blue. A really big brush. I've been thinking about the scene, obviously. How to, if this is the way you're looking at it, how am I going to show you that there's moonlight reflection? So in this case, I've got to make sure that there's some blue just on the top of it. You see that I'm not painting every bit of this, because in this part it's like the sphere, so it's gonna get darker here. And this is just initial color. So I tend to be really sketchy in this first bit. I'm always going to be able to adjust any colors later on. This is it's really important to make sure you got the volume still. So like this is ordinary painting in volumes, but just with a color that's not obvious with this part. I'm already with the much darker blue. And often this is, like always, a process of going back and forth. You know, taking it back a notch, going to a lighter color again, taking it darker again, etc. And obviously, if you got like an airbrush, this is much easier. Like the most of the work I did on the scenic base was done with airbrush prior to doing ordinary brush.
So I suppose the direction of the spray effectively acts as the light source, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yes. You still got to do some tweaking and touching up, but yeah, you got most of the work done for you. The thing is, so this is fun. I'm gonna do the front part much more with like a stroking effect to emulate the hairs, the fur, you know. But when you're doing intense light like this butt part, the light is so strong that it's gonna drown out all the shades that the fur is gonna create. There's going to be not so much of that texture in there. So I'm going over to black, pure black, and I could even take this to base coat the rest of the model if it need be, like here. This is the thing always with difficult things I try. I'm gonna make a picture in my head and try to envision, try to make as clear as possible a vision of what it's gonna be. And then I'm gonna paint it in my head, trying to already think on how I should achieve it. But then there's also reality that might make stuff a bit different. Let's see if we can brighten it up just a bit more. Take some whites. I'm not gonna go to pure white, because if you've been paying attention, you know why.
Because the reflection should never be as bright as the source.
Ooh, someone's been taking notes. So now you see I'm already creating some more brightness here. Obviously to the top, because that's where most of the light should be. I'm taking a look, just seeing how it reflects just over the top, and just seeing where I should be paying a bit more attention to light. Reaching a status of glazing. Glazing helps me tie in all the colors, also create some more depth, some more shades to where I need them to be, etc. As bright as this has gotten, it should be toned down a lot more. This is why I wasn't worried about the sketching part. In this stage I can have it appear much more blended. Put in just a couple of very bright spots. And this is mostly done for dramatic effect, because I want to have your... Well, the thing is, I'm going to put it on it there, and it's really difficult to be able to enjoy it from the other side, you know. So I'm not... but still, I'm going to be able to try to take your eye towards this point, because it's much lighter there. Let me see if you can, does that work for you? I think I've got to put it a bit more like this. This is as far as I'm going to get it right now. I'll probably do a bit of detail work in the hairs, just to add some blacks in to get that contrast a bit more. Maybe even do a bit more original color in here, where the light is a lot less. So like skin tones and the fur tones in here and here. And then I'm gonna paint obviously the front with a lot of skin here, fur, skin, fur. Maybe even glazing just a bit of skin tones and fur tones, just in the shaded parts there, just a hint of it. But that's it. Small recap, because it was a lot of theory, but maybe just some hints and pointers still. So take into account there are two things you're working with. That's the source that's shedding off the light, and that's the material that it's going to be reflected on, and both behave differently according to certain circumstances. For the light, that's mostly the intensity of it. How big is it gonna swallow all the other colors? Like with the wolf, you saw that it's gonna swallow all the fur colors, mostly. Still gonna get something back in there. Or is it just muting? Is it giving a glaze or a glare of its color over something else? And then you've got a material that you've got to figure out how reflective is it? Is it something that's absorbing the light a lot, making a big area, but when it's going further away, it's going to reflect less? Or is it like a metal that's going to be very sharp, very bright, very mirror-like? It's going to be able to reflect even from a farther distance, but it's going to be much smaller, right? So and that's the whole thing. actually. For dramatic purposes in painting, you can always decide if you would do the non-lit area very, very dark with muted colors, with dark purples, dark browns, or you would paint them up in full light, but then still remember that the unlit area is always darker than the lit area, which is also darker than the original source. That was a class, and thank you for taking notes and being here. Class dismissed.
Excellent, excellent. As always, thank you so much for the workshop this evening. Awesome stuff.
All my pleasure.
Look forward to seeing how the wolf progresses and how it then blends into the scene. Can't wait to see the final product.
Right. Thanks. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here, and thanks, Monkeys with Fire, for hosting this stream again. And have a good evening. Cheers.
Bye for now, then.
Bye-bye.
As always, thank you so much for joining us this evening for the workshop. I thought that was very insightful. It was really good to see how I might be able to use some of those techniques on an upcoming project. All right then, everybody have a good evening, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. But until then, bye for now.